ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to be doing one of the most dangerous things you have ever witnessed on YouTube. Now, be careful. Make sure you don't have children watching, because this is serious business. I don't want anything to happen to me that I'm going to be showing on the internet to everybody. So be forewarned, this isn't suitable for younger audiences. I present to you Pop Rocks. Coca-Cola. Don't do it, you say. Don't do it. Well, in the interest of all things entertainment, I'm about to do something that should never be done. I'm going to combine the lethal Pop Rocks with some of my favorite soda, which happens to be vanilla in flavor. Be ready, because here we go. Hello YouTube, welcome back to another episode of my channel where we talk about what makes the 80s so great and absurd at the same time. I got to grow up during this time. I got to see some of the most amazing things. I saw some ridiculous things. It was a great time to grow up. We didn't have the constraints that kids have these days. So the trouble we got into was immense. There was no limit to the problems that we could get into. Our parents were a little bit more lackadaisical with how we were treated and what we could do. Not so much these days, being a parent of 3 young girls, but yes, we got to do a lot and raise some hell. So what I want to do today is talk about a little bit of what was more absurd about the 80s, and that was some of the urban legends that came out during this time. And one of those more remarkable ones, and I think they've actually tested this out, and you just saw me do it, was how you do not want to mix Pop Rocks and soda. This was actually something that scared me half to death. I never wanted to test the limits here. I had no courage. This was not something that I ever wanted to look at and be a part of. Now you realize just how silly it is. But this urban legend was actually how Mikey...
You know, he likes it. Mikey likes it.
Well, Mikey liked it.
He liked it.
From the commercial checks actually blew up because he had experimented with Pop Rocks and soda.
Pop Rocks and Cola? I'm Mikey.
It's not.
Silly. Absolutely ridiculous. I don't know how children believe these things. I mean, you try this these days, and kids are just going to look at you and you go, are you serious?
Yeah, you buttheads are delusional.
Yeah, that was one of the more absurd ones. None of my friends wanted to try that out. We weren't going to take our chances. Again, if you blow up, you blow up. And Pop Rocks, you know, you put them in your mouth and you felt like there was things happening that probably shouldn't happen. And if you add a little soda, well, yeah, your stomach's going to blow up. So watch out for Pop Rocks. All right, so let's talk about urban legends and why they exist.
No sex equals great sex.
They're typically spread through word of mouth, social media nowadays. Way back when, it was word of mouth, friends. There are several reasons why these stories do exist to this day. They tap into our fears. Urban legends often carry scary or upsetting scenarios.
Shut up, butthead!
The idea of a stranger hiding in your house.
Scary house. Real monsters.
or deadly creature lurking in the sewers. These stories tap into our primal fears, and they create a sense of unease that sticks with us. 2, they provide a sense of mystery.
You mean like a haunted flying saucer?
Urban legends often have an element of mystery that is a question of whether a particular story is true or not. This ambiguity can be intriguing and makes some of us want to learn more. And that's important in these days because that's what we call clickbait. Number 3, they offer a way to connect with others. Some people just love telling stories, and if that story is believable or you're a really good storyteller, it's another way to bond with others. You know, we've always heard about campfire stories. Well, this is one of those times where you hear about urban legends is at the campfire. Generally, for me, it was like at a Boy Scout camp or something of that nature. 4, they offer a way to explain the unexplainable.
Oh man, I have no idea what's going on.
Urban legends often offer an explanation for something that is difficult to understand or explain.
Oh, something, pal? You smell an awful lot like flowers.
Such as the sudden disappearance of a person or a strange occurrence.
It is half man, half bear, and half pig.
By providing a narrative that makes sense, these stories can help us make sense of the world around us. Overall, urban legends offer a way to tap into our fears. They provide a sense of mystery, connect with others, and explain the unexplainable. While they might not always be based in fact, they can be a powerful way to capture the imagination and spark the curiosity of all people. And it's a way of bringing people together. I mean, we all have social media. We all see those scary stories. Whether or not they're true, that's why we have websites to kind of research. Back in the 80s, we didn't have websites. We had people. And if one person told you that story, you go to the next person, you ask them, hey, is that true? They say yes. Well, that's it. It's true. What more are you going to say? Nowadays, we have some fact checking. But that's what made the 80s kind of special. We didn't have everything that we have now to really look into anything. So when a story came out and it hit you hard. Especially if you had friends that can corroborate and give you that little bit of evidence that it's true. So with that, let's go over some of the most absurd urban legends, urban myths that have ever come out, specifically in the 1980s. Here's one that we've probably seen in a few movies, and it was actually a real thing. And it's hard to believe, but it happened. We talked about this. This was another one of those things that we talked about in school. The alligator in the sewer. And not just any alligator. We're talking about a supersized alligator, because naturally, when an alligator gets in the sewer, the things it comes across, we're talking about the excrement, the possible toxic waste.
Probably from rolling around in that toxic waste.
So the size of alligators can grow disproportionately to the normal alligator when it's in the sewer, of course. Naturally. But this was something that was very scary, again, being a kid, and I was a very sheltered child, so I wasn't going near any sewers. This was just ridiculous. And I can't say it any more than that. So you look back at it and you say, wow, we actually were a little bit nervous about alligators. This actually originated more from like the big city. I think actually it might have been a story told about New York City, maybe Chicago. I lived in a little town in Maine, so it wasn't something that was really prevalent.
Normal small town life.
But we talked about it. It was one of those lunchtime stories. So there you go. Number 2, the alligator in the sewer. Third most terrifying legend for me And this was one of those stories that you would tell when you were at camp. The man with the hook for a hand.
Hook versus Pan!
And I'm sure this is something that's been going around for ages. But I remember it being told as if it were real, as if there was really a guy with a hook that was going around terrorizing teenagers that were, in their car up to no good.
Hey, I thought of a game we can play in the car.
And of course, what do kids do in cars, in park places, in the dark? Well, that's for you to decide. But for whatever reason, murderers like to get those teenagers in the act. Now, you ask me, it's because parents didn't want that to happen. So I think it was a meeting between all the parents at the time. They said, hey, let's tell this story, let's get it moving. Of course, we didn't have internet back then, so I'm sure this was something that was probably told at the neighborhood PTA, or maybe it was put in a newspaper. I don't know, but it got around. I mean, all my friends knew about it in different schools. It never happened, okay? No guy with a hook for a hand. Maybe something similar. But this was one of those ones that would give me nightmares thinking about. And I think they have done. All right. Number 4. I guess it depends on how you look at it. Being a kid, not as scary as some things. Being a parent, terrifying. I remember to this day, and I don't know if they still do this or not, but they would set up stations in the hospital to x-ray your kid's candy because of a legend that started sometime, it might have been before the 80s, but it was very prevalent in the 80s, that there were very deranged people that would put razor blades or poison.
I got a rock.
Or different things in a kid's candy, and they would eat it, and then something horrible would happen to them. Of course, if it's a razor blade, you know what's going to happen.
I have a hole in my stomach!
But my parents told me all about this. We would carefully get the candy home, and we would look through it and make sure there were no razor blades, no possible poison, remove anything that had no wrapper on it. And in the 80s, that was pretty common, that you would find candy without wrappers. And, apples every now and then, we'd pull those out, because there's no telling if there's a razor blade in the apple. But this was taken very seriously. I don't think to this day there's ever been, except maybe one time that this happened, and it was very specific to somebody who knew somebody else. I'll pull that up and I'll put that in this video if I do find it. But for the rest, nothing really happened. Nothing. I don't think there was any other incidences besides maybe 1 or 2 occasions. So if that helps ease your mind, parents, I'll still check the kids' game. 5. This one's a little bit scary. This is probably in a few ghost story books. I lived in Maine. I had a ghost story book that I read at some periods of time, and one of the more scary stories that there was a woman hitchhiker. You would drive down the road, see a lady in a gown, some kind of dress, a white dress, pick her up.
We usually don't pick up hitchhikers.
You'd go down the road, be in the back seat, and then, a mile down the road, she'd be gone. Nothing really dangerous, but it's enough to kind of put you on the edge of your seat, especially back then. Hitchhiking was more prevalent. So in other words, this is probably one of those stories that was brought up to scare kids so that they wouldn't pick up a hitchhiker because it could be a ghost. To me, I would think picking up, the deranged slasher would be a little bit more scary. But there is one of those as well, and you could see that in the movie The Hitcher.
Maybe we should start hitchhiking.
Where a couple picks up a deranged serial killer, and he ends up stalking them for the whole movie. So same thing with the ghost. I think there's some stories where the ghost does stalk the people that are driving. But nonetheless, in the 80s, without the prevalence of the internet, you couldn't really look these stories up. So you're thinking, gosh, did this really happen? All right, number 6, the cursed video game. Now, we're talking about a time that video games would just start coming into real popularity. I mean, we start with the Atari, we saw ColecoVision, we saw the Atari 5200, the Atari 2600. Let's see, there were a few more that came out in the 80s, including the Nintendo. So this is probably one of those stories, again, to scare kids to not do something too often, or maybe stay away from it because parents didn't really understand video games back then. They maybe didn't want you around them as often. There was always that one politician that said video games or where society is going to degrade because kids are playing violent video games.
Evil, pure evil.
To this day, there hasn't been any real link between violence and video games, but this is one of those things that actually have a very popular urban legend where they put a standing video game in an arcade, and it was done by the government, and they actually did mind control experiments, or I think it was some hypnotism. I can't remember, but yeah, the cursed video game, that was a real thing in the 1980s. Now, I say real thing as far as an urban legend that people believed, not something that really happened. Hello, YouTube. You want to be a part of the fastest growing channel available? Maybe the second fastest? Maybe the third fastest? Feel free to join this channel. This is where we celebrate the 80s. Daily, nightly, monthly, weekly, any other time. I'm going to be putting out content once or twice a week, so feel free to peruse at your leisure. I will be here for the remainder of your stay on YouTube, so you can find me at Lawrence Axel, Virulent Viking Videos. I do hope you enjoy this content. I do try to entertain. I try to make something funny. If you see something you like, you see something that you think I can do better, please feel free to let me know. But in the meantime, check out a video and subscribe. Thank you for listening.